So I have these two towers of totes, and most of these are really just paper or ephemera. And so what I'm deciding is that I need to figure out how I can start maximizing the space that I have. And actually, paper is probably the least of any craft supply that I have. However, I am thinking that I want to get some of this paper that I've had for several years now used up. And so I think what we're going to do is a little series called What's in the Box. So I am going to make anything out of what's in the box. And hopefully we'll be able to make several books and just get some of these papers used up, whether it's for me or whether it's stuff that I put in the Etsy store. I have a lot here that I can use. I have this whole little baggie here of book covers that I can use to upcycle into new books. So yeah. So we're just going to pick one of these boxes here on this side, and then once we start opening up the box, we'll figure out the strategy for how many journals we're actually going to be able to make. So let's go. So getting started here, I'm just going to start digging through the first tote that I grabbed, and you'll see there are lots of different kinds of paper and stationery and scrapbook paper. All of the papers that I'm going to be using are the random like loose leaf papers that I've collected over time, and or scrapbook paper. It's all loose leaf. I don't believe I use any scrapbook paper pads. So this is the perfect time to get all of those little random pieces of scrapbook paper that you just kind of have collected, used. And I'm not going to be using any digital kits in this. It's just going to be strictly saved scrapbook paper. The other thing I wanted to say was when you're in this phase of going through and selecting out your papers, I think it's a really good idea to be super realistic with yourself. So if you are digging through your papers and you're like, oh, I'm going to save this and I'm going to save this and I'm going to save this, and you don't know why you're saving it, then just use it. If you come across things while you're digging through your bins, and you're like, okay, I know for a fact that I'm going to use this in XYZ project. Because I know that I do buy certain papers to use in certain projects, and I do know that they are upcoming projects. So those papers I will set aside, but if it's another paper that I come across and I just like it, it's time to use it. And so I really encourage you to just be very realistic with yourself when you're picking out your papers, and digging through those like loose leaf papers. Papers that we buy loose leaf are really just because we like them. So if you don't have a purpose for it in the future, or at least the near future, then I would really recommend just using it. Another thing to note when you're doing this project, I know a lot of us have a pretty good sized paper stash. So I would also recommend doing this when you have the time to set aside and the time to really dig in and just go through each paper and really decide what to use. I have some really random things in here, like this JLo flyer. And this is one that I got, actually. It was a 12 by 12 piece of paper that they gave out. I believe it was at the finale of American Idol, you know, the finale before they brought the show back, the grand finale. But yeah, so this is really something that you need to do when you're able to set the time aside and really just focus and dig in and really go through your papers. And either you need to use it or save it for something that you're certain that you're going to do, or maybe pass it along to another one of your crafty friends who you know will use it. So as you can see here, we're able to get a good 2 inches of papers pulled out of my totes. So that's like 2 inches, you guys. There's book spines that are 2 inches. 2 inches worth of 12 by 12 and other 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that I was able to pull out of my paper totes. And now we're going to start dividing these papers into stacks. So this is where I'm going to be able to figure out how many books I want to make out of these papers. So I'm going through and I really want to kind of disperse these evenly because some of the papers are heavyweight scrapbook paper and some of them are lightweight paper. And so I really want to make sure I get a good mix of both in each of the piles because I don't want to have a book that has like all heavy duty paper and I don't want it to all have like lightweight paper. So here are my upcycled book covers, the ones that I was mentioning previously. And before I start folding my signatures, I want to get a good measurement on how big these book covers are because they're really going to stay intact. Like I'm not going to cut them down or anything. I'm really just going to fold the papers so that they conform to the size of the book. And this Heidi book, actually, I think it was like, I don't know, like 7 or 7.5 inches across. So I'm having to fold my papers kind of in a unique way so that they will meet from the book cover to book cover, like the edge to edge. Otherwise, it would be like the pages are too small for the book cover, if that makes sense. Quickly going back to the time factor, this was about 6 to 7 hours worth of real-time work and about 2.5 hours worth of filming, and I was able to get it pinched down to just over 20 minutes just so that you guys don't have to sit here and suffer through this extremely long video of me folding papers. Okay, so over here on the bookshelf, this little space here, it was filled with papers all the way up to the top. So what I did was, you can see I cleared some out. This little stack here is what's left over from what we just took out. Some of the papers just started getting kind of redundant for the amount of books. But I still have the little totes that we were working in down here because before I put them back on the shelf, we know that we've already emptied out a lot of papers out of these. So from the space that I just showed you on the bookshelf, these papers came out of there. So I'm hoping because they're kind of more like loose leaf papers, we'll have space for them inside of these totes. So let's see. Okay, so as you can see here, this ledge is pretty much like to the top now. So we were able to really just fill up this tote pretty much all the way to the brim now with a good chunk of those papers that are loose leaf. So let's see if we can get some more into these other two totes here. Okay, gang, we were able to fit all of those loose leaf papers that were just sitting here, except for this paper pad. And the only reason why it didn't fit is because it's a little too long for the tote. And I want to keep the cover. As you've been seeing, I've been using those. I can use those as covers for books because they're pretty heavy cardstock. So I've got these back on the shelves and they're full to the brim. I'm going to take this one. And the little residuals that didn't fit into those books and put these back on the little shelf, on the bookshelf. And as you can see, I still have a good amount of space here. Basically, effectively, this is all the paper that we just used up. So you can see, just by using the stuff that you have, you can actually start freeing up some space, you know, and clearing out your stash. What I'm going to do for now is just put this little box of stickers back. There is one more tote that's missing from here, and I had grabbed that one on accident, but it's all ephemera. So hopefully we'll be able to dig through that one once we get these signatures put together, and then I'll come and bring that tote back here, and then we can see what ephemera we want to grab out of here. So I'm just going to put all this stuff back, and then we're going to go figure out the signatures now. So now that we're getting into the phase where we're folding our pages, we want to make sure that we get them folded to the height that matches our book cover. So I'm going to go ahead and cut and press all of my papers so that they fit into my book perfectly. And like I said, if you have a book cover that you've already made in the past, maybe you didn't like it or didn't want to use it, go grab that and use it. Or if you don't have like a book cover that you can upcycle. And as you can see, for the two soft cover books that I'm going to make, I'm just going to use those covers from the paper pads that I finished and use those as the front covers for these books that I'm going to make here, these two soft cover books. Once you get all of your signatures organized how you want them, the next thing to do is cut your pages down so that they match the cover of your book if it's a soft cover, or that they sit nicely within your book if it's a hardcover book. So that's the next step we're going to do here. Now I've got these pages cut down as much as I want them to be, and at this point you can go ahead and bind your books if you want to. These covers are actually pretty cute, even though they're the covers of paper pads. I still like the way that they look, even though that's what they were formerly, but I am going to go ahead and cover mine with fabric. So we're gonna stick around for that. These are the hardcover books that I am going to upcycle. I'm going to just modify my books so that they fit into these books as they are. I don't really want to redo any of the spines. However, if you are interested to know how you can add a new spine to an existing book cover, I have a video tutorial that I did on that a while back, so I will link it down in the description box below. So for now, let's go ahead and get these two fabric covers onto these two top books and the rest of our book covers all prepared for binding. So to start, I'm just going to measure across this little spine here of the Heidi book, and I'm going to rip that centerpiece out because we really don't need it. So I'm going to take a piece of cardstock that matches the height of my signatures after I get this little spine area cleaned up, and this is just going to give like a new bit of reinforcement to the spine. And I don't want the spine to be too squishy, or I don't also want it to be like rigid, so that's why I'm choosing to use this like heavyweight craft cardstock for this step. So just adding a little bit of double-sided tape in here to get it stuck down, and then I'll come in with a little bit of glue to add another layer to this adhesion. So I'm super happy with the way this cover's shaping up so far. And I know that with this book, I don't want to destroy the spine because I really love the way that it looks. So I'm going to consider that into the binding method that I used for this book. For this book, I'm going to repeat the same steps that I did on the previous book, where we rip out the unwanted spine, and then we just add our heavyweight paper down in the cover, and then I'm going to measure how big my spine is so that I know how big to make my template for sewing the signatures in. And this is a really skinny spine, and I believe the signature, or this book has, I want to say 5 or 6 signatures, and I think the spine is about 1.25 inches or something like that. But anyway, it's a really small spine, and we're going to have to consider that also when we start using this book, because it's going to really depend. It's really going to affect what you can do with this kind of book. But I think this is really good that we're doing it this way, because we're going to end up with a bunch of books that you can do a bunch of different things with. So each book will have its own purpose, and we'll get to that sooner or later. Actually, I think this like 8 signatures in this. So there are a bunch of signatures. So once you get your template all situated to the way that you like to do it, now's the time where we're going to start binding our signatures into the book. And for this one, I'm just going to thread the signatures through the spine. For when we come back in the next video, either I will show you how I do it or what I did, but I'm going to end up covering up the spine on this one anyway. But this is just one of the ways that you can get your signatures into your book, is just by sewing them straight through the spine. let's hop over to one of my favorite mediums, which is fabric. So I've got two fabrics that I pulled out of my stash here, a couple of fabrics that I've been wanting to use for books for myself for a while now. And like I said, you can reinforce the cover on this. Since it is just the cover of a paper pad, you can reinforce it before you add the fabric down. I'm not going to this time because it's just a book for me, and I dare this book to fall apart. It will be a welcome challenge because I would love to see how I could fix something like that if it should fall apart, you know. But I'm pretty confident that it won't because it's going to be adhered with fabric, which is kind of like a binder and a reinforcer on its own. When I cut this piece of fabric off here on the side, it just so happened to be the perfect size to make a pocket. So why not? And this is a great way to, you know, figure out how you can use something before it actually turns into a scrap that you throw into the scrap box. So consider these kinds of things when you're also making your books. So that was too perfect. So now this piece of fabric that I randomly cut is perfectly used for a fabric cover and a fabric pocket. So I took both of these over to my sewing machine, stitched around the perimeter, and now I'm just cutting off a little bit of the excess. I hope this video and seeing this process is really starting to encourage you all to dig into those papers that you haven't looked at for a long time. I guarantee you're going to be happy when you see them again, and maybe you'll just be inspired to use them in general. So I really hope that you guys will all join me and make a book or two, and I think we'll come back and we'll actually start using these books for something fun. I think that'd be a really good idea. So dig those papers out, you guys, and start using them. So we're able to get 5 books out of this 2 inches of paper that I pulled out that I hadn't looked at in years. And we're gonna stop here for today, and we will come back and we'll pick up where we left off. How about that? So that is going to wrap it up for me for now. Be sure to stay tuned because you never know what direction this odd flock of ours is heading into. And until next time, toodaloo.